Welcome to the fifth in our series of educational webinars on retail metrics. This morning we're going to be doing gross margin, return on investment, the biggie as Dan says. My name is Donna Wesley Rogers and I'm the Director of Marketing and Public Relations for One Step Retail Solutions. If you so desire, you can tweet about this presentation at #RetailMetrics on Twitter. And you can actually go back there at any time and read the tweets that have been done during the presentation and add anything that you'd like to at that time. This webinar is brought to you by Retail Smart Guys and One Step Retail Solutions. A little commercial for us. One Step Retail Solutions has been partnering with retailers for 27 years. We've installed over 6,000 stores on retail management systems and currently support over 3,600 stores. Our staff all have retail backgrounds. We've all worked in retail at one time or the other, so we're not just technology guys. We actually really do understand retail. And I put up the logos of, we actually represent 6 different point-of-sale retail management systems now. I guess the one that's not up here is the newest one, which is NCR Silver. And we really pride ourselves in being able to match retailers with the right system for them. Not try to fit you into a particular retail system, but find out what you need and get you the right system for you. So I'm going to introduce to you, I am going to introduce to you Dan Jablons. I want to tell you that Dan worked in retail while attending The Ohio State University, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Marketing and Production. He's worked with many, many, many well-known retailers, a few you might have heard of, such as Walmart, Target, JCPenney, now JCP, American Apparel, Donna Karan, Jimmy Choo, Charles David, Diesel, Oakley, Toomey, the Hollywood Bowl, many others. He's worked for a clothing manufacturer where he piloted vendor management inventory programs. He worked for One Step Retail Solutions for many years where he installed systems and provided merchandising help to retailers large and small. And he's also done a lot of internet marketing where he's helped retailers establish a presence on the web. And the other thing that you know about Dan by now if you've been attending our webinars, but if this is your first, I should tell you that in addition to his retail background, Dan has a background in improvisational theater. He's performed with comedy troupes all over the United States. Last season, he appeared on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Dan combines his extensive knowledge of retail with his comedy skills to become one of the industry's most popular speakers. He's spoken at Magic. He's spoken at many local trade show events, many other venues. We're very, very happy to have him here with us today to run through this with us. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Donna. And hello, everyone, and welcome to our fifth in the series of these webinars talking about the statistics that you need to look at to keep your retail business rocking and rolling. Today we're going to talk about gross margin, return on investment, which is my favorite of the stats. So I just wanted to tell you that right from the beginning. And the reason, well, you'll see there's a lot of reasons why, but I think it's probably the stat that if you pay attention to this one as much or more as any of the others, I think you're going to find that your cash flow improves and your profitability improves. Okay, so this one is, to my mind, one of the more important stats. So I hope you're ready to really dig into this one. I've tried to, Gmroi is the abbreviation for gross margin return on investment, and sometimes it can get complicated. People sort of complicate this number, and I've done my best to really simplify this for you, to give you just the really simplest and best way to get to this number, and then how to really utilize it within your business, and how do we utilize it at Retail Smart Guys from the perspective of open-to-buy planning and inventory planning. And it's a great measurement as to the success of that. How well is that doing? How well is that increasing our profitability? Okay, so we'll spend some time on this today, and I hope that this one really is one that you pay very close and careful attention to and use a lot in your business. Okay, so as always, I start with my Lord Kelvin quote: "You cannot improve what you do not measure." And in the measurement of profitability, by the way, a lot of people sometimes either look at the gross margin reports that come out of Retail Pro, like those sales summary reports, or out of QuickBooks. The same ones exist in Lightspeed. They exist in they certainly exist in Counterpoint, and they and in all the different packages that One Step offers. Gross margin is one way to look at things. And then sometimes people go and they, every once in a while they get their financial statements from their accountant, right? They get their profit and loss statement, and they get their balance sheets. And I have to say that most people don't really have an education in reading financial statements, and what do they really tell you, and what do they mean, and what does that translate to, and that sort of thing. Those are good ways to look at things as long as you understand those. Gross margin return on investment is something you can look at in the middle of that, and actually it forces you to sort of take some action, both in terms of how you're marking goods down or how you're marking them up, and the amount of inventory that you're stocking. So that's why I love this one a lot. But again, it's one of those things where you've got to measure it to improve what's happening within your business. So Lord Kelvin has been my hero throughout these webinars, and he's always the second slide. So there you go. All right, so let's get into gross margin return on investment, or GMROI. You'll hear some people call it Gmroi, but I don't. I just like GMROI. So GMROI is a measurement of how well the inventory is turning, combined with a measurement of how profitable the investment in that inventory is. Okay? Why? Because if you look at the formula for it, it's your gross margin dollars, right, what you basically produced in profit from your sales, divided by your average inventory at cost. So it's your average inventory over whatever time period you're looking at. Mostly it's done like a 12-month rolling is the best way I've seen it done. But some people measure it monthly and compare month to month. And there are lots of stats there are lots of point-of-sale programs that do it that way. Or you can get an annualized number, which I think is probably a better way to go, because you don't necessarily turn things 12 times a year, so you need to look at maybe seasonally or maybe annually and look at the impact of it. But basically, if you look at that, what it's telling you is I'm going to look at the profit you've generated, and I'm going to look at that in relation to the amount of inventory that you're carrying. Okay, so what are we looking for? The highest dollar value possible, because GMROI is often expressed in dollars, or it is expressed in dollars, okay? So let's look at an actual example, okay? And so in 2011, the sweater department had a total gross margin of $120,000. And throughout 2011, our average inventory at cost, what we invested in, was $48,000. So $120,000 divided by $48,000 is a $2.50 GMROI. Okay, so again, expressed in dollars, and we're taking our total gross margin for whatever time period we're going to measure this for, and we're going to divide that by what our average inventory was at cost. Different programs come up with different average inventory numbers, by the way, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we go a little deeper here. Or actually, I'll do that now. I know that the way Retail Pro does it is it comes up with an average inventory dollar number per day, especially when you get it to version 9. Some of them, and what most people do who do not have systems that have GMROI in it, they get their average inventory, or they collect up what their inventory was at the end of each month, and then divide that by the number of months that they're averaging. So if you did it over the last 10 months, you take what your inventory was at cost at the end of each month for those 10 months, divide that by 10, and that was your average inventory at cost. Okay? And the gross margin dollars, that's easy to get out of every point-of-sale system. But there it is, $2.50 GMROI. Okay, so now we know what that is. Okay, big deal. What does that really mean? Okay? Well, a couple of things about it. First off, GMROI is always expressed in dollars, like we've been saying, okay? And another way to say this is, for every dollar you invested, how many dollars did you get back? So let's think about what we just did. So for every dollar I invested in sweaters last year, I got back $2.50. Not bad, right? Well, maybe. We'll see. So how do you break this down? Okay, well, the first dollar of GMROI pays for the goods. It's basically what your cost of goods are for the merchandise that you landed. Okay? The second dollar pays for the operations. It pays for the rent. It pays for the utilities. It pays for the people. It pays for credit card charges, et cetera, advertising, blah, 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 blah. Everything else that's not cost of goods. Okay? Everything above that second dollar is profit to the business. So in the previous example, let me go back to that actually for a minute, where we had a $2.50 GMROI, that means that the first dollar that we got in GMROI paid for the inventory. That's what paid for roughly the $48,000 on average that we had throughout the year. The second dollar paid for the rent and the heat and the lights and the people and all that good stuff, okay? And everything above that is profit to the business. So that's how that basically runs, okay? That's what that does. Now, 250 is an okay number, okay? But really what are we looking for, okay? The sky is the limit. So how high can we get it? What else can we do? And so when you consider the two elements of GMROI, which is your margin dollars and your average inventory, you improve it by either increasing your margin dollars or lowering your investment in inventory. Gee, that seems simple, doesn't it? Well, obviously there's more to it than that, but you know, those are the basics of it. And really, isn't that the basics of good retailing? Being able to get the most margin dollars you can get with the lowest inventory knowledge, lowest investments you can make. That's not only the basis, by the way, of retail. It's the basis of business. It's the basis of everything that's to do with, you know, capitalism and Adam Smith and all the stuff you learned in basic economics in college. If you did that, you know, I mean, that's just the basic thing of business right there. And so in this one stat, you are measuring exactly and precisely those things that you need to measure to ensure that your inventory investment is really paying off for you and paying off for your business, generating the cash flow you need and generating the profitability you need. And this is why it's my favorite of all the stats, because this one actually really focuses on profitability. And it really focuses on, you know, the other one's focused on inventory levels, right, when we went through all those, sell-through and stock to sales and turn and all those things. But those really focused more on units and didn't focus as much on the margin that you're generating. And that's why I like this one the most, because this one also takes into account what your gross margin is on these. Okay, so how do we use it? You know, you compare the GMROI from period to period. So you look at it and say, okay, well, it was $2.50 last year. We're at $3 this year. That's good. Why did it happen? Did I get better markup? Am I buying better? Am I buying goods that I can get better margin out of? Or am I reducing my inventory investment? I don't have to have 3,000 sweaters to sell 20 or something like that. You know, am I using those other stats to measure that? So it's usually compared period to period. And when you look at improvements or not improvements, if you look at if things get worse, what's causing it? Did I make a larger inventory investment? Did I step out? You know, listen, as buyers, sometimes you see something, you think this is going to be the greatest thing that ever happens, and you take that risk. You buy more inventory than you think you might need because you believe in a particular vendor, or you believe in a style, or you see a trend emerging and you want to be first into it. These are all, you know, these are all things that are valid risks that you take in business, and sometimes you've got to take those risks in order to grow your business. So you got to look at your GMROI and kind of figure out, did I take a risk here, or did I just not really buy to a plan, or am I not, you know, I bought it, but my customers didn't like it, so I had to take pretty severe markdowns, those kinds of things. You know, those are things to look at, okay? You use the GMROI to quickly identify profitable and unprofitable classes of merchandise. So when I start planning a client, as an example, in the world of open to buy, we try to look back at 2 years worth of history. And when we do that, we go through and we actually measure the GMROI of the classes that they've had over the last 2 years to kind of figure out, okay, which are the greatest hits? Which are the ones where we have really great GMROI, and which are the ones where we really have bad GMROI? And sometimes you look at the GMROI, and it's less than $1, which means we've invested so much into that class, we're not even getting our money back out of it. Even if we generate as much margin as we can, we're never going to get our dollars out of it, right? So we look at the best and the worst. And the reason we look at the best and the worst, or the profitable and the unprofitable classes, is the unprofitable ones, we've got to figure out what we're going to do to get the cash out of it and turn the class around. And the profitable ones, we look at to go, okay, well, we're at a 5. We're at a $5 GMROI. Can I get it to a 7? Can I get it to an 8? How do we do that? How do we maximize that? Obviously, our customers are liking it. We're getting good margins out of it. We're not having to invest crazy dollars into it. okay, how do we grow that? How do we make that even bigger? Can we alter our assortment plan to include more there, because obviously those classes are working well for us, okay? So number 3 says it pretty well. We prioritize the classes of merchandise that need immediate attention. We really look at the best ones to figure out where we grow those, and we look at the worst ones to try to figure out, okay, well, we're struggling here. Why do we have to have so much inventory? And does it make sense for us to even be in that business? Okay? Very powerful stuff, though, and very, very useful when you're planning your business and planning seasons going forward and planning to see how am I going to make money in spring after what happened in fall, or comparing last spring to this spring. Gee, I brought in a whole bunch of jackets, and wow, those jackets just didn't perform. Maybe my customer doesn't like jackets. Maybe I need to focus on sweaters. Maybe I need to focus on hoodies. Maybe I need to focus on heavier weight knits, and maybe that makes more sense to my customer. Okay, so how do we use this to improve the business? Well, one thing is, let's start looking for heavy markdown classes, classes where we buy it and we take big markdowns to sell the goods through. You know, you don't need to do that, okay? You really, obviously you don't need to do that, but I mean, the whole thing about the heavy markdown classes is that sometimes, especially in the review of stats, it doesn't really hit home until you start looking at this stat, just how deeply you're having to take markdowns to move through inventories. And then you start looking at things like the vendor says to you, well, you know, you bought, $10,000 from me last spring, so I'm sure you're going to do that again this spring, okay? And you can get trapped into that sort of thing, or get roped into that, oh, this is what I normally do. There is no normally do in retail when we're talking about buying inventory. There's trends, there's evaluating those trends, there's looking at where the business is going, there's looking at where the market is going, what's fresh, what's new, what's exciting, what's going to bring traffic into the stores. Remember from some of my past webinars, I think I've got it in this one too, but you know, there is no better marketing for a retail store than having the right merchandise available to sell. And looking at your Gmroi stat tells you things like what the first 2 lines of this slide actually say. They basically tell you, okay, where am I taking heavy markdowns where I'm not getting the margin I want to get out of these goods, okay? Or I'm getting, you know, the other thing that Gmroi tells you is, you know, I am getting my full margin out of these goods, but I had to invest so heavily to get there that it's not profitable for me to stock this class. That's the second one, which is the heavy inventory class. Yeah, I'm selling it at full price, but boy, I have to stock a lot of it, it seems, to sell those goods at full price. People want to see like there's a gigantic assortment. In a couple of these webinars, I've used the example of a guy who sells towels on the East Coast, and he found that one of the things he had to work on was reducing his display or his assortment of towels so that he actually made money in that business. He was selling them, but his investment in towels was so heavy that he actually was not making money in that classification. And he was fooled because he was getting sales. They were selling. But selling is only half of the equation, right? What inventory I'm stocking and how much of it I'm stocking is also key to making sure that you actually get profitability out of what you're doing with these classes, okay? All right. So why is this my favorite stat? Okay. Well, number one is it's the only stat that includes profit margin. Now you can use the other ones. You can do turns based on profit margin or based on retail dollars or cost dollars. We talked a little bit about that one. You can do sell-through based on that. Remember, I did in the sell-through webinar, for those of you that didn't see it, make sure you check the One-Step website and download that one. We talked about, you know, sell-through based on margin. That's not bad, okay? But it doesn't really look at your inventory investment, okay? So the reason I like this one is it compares your profit margin to your inventory investment, okay? Number 3 is it's the one stat which, when you heavily focus upon it, when you really take the time to look at your Gmroi on a department class by department class basis, it is the one where you focus on it. It puts your attention on the 2 areas that you absolutely have to be looking at, and one of them is your profit margin, and the other one is your inventory investment. And to be blunt, in the world of consulting with retail, I have to tell you that more times than not, people look at the profit margin, but they don't look at the inventory investment. They look at what they're selling, and it's always fun to look at a bestseller because life's tough enough without looking at a worst seller. But it's not bad to do that from time to time. You certainly want to look at where your margin is coming from, but at the same time, you have to look at what did you put on the floor to make that happen. And if your average inventory really is too high, then you've spent more than you need to spend. And you've taken more of the dollars that you need to be mobile, to be flexible in the marketplace, to capture trends, to look for new things that are happening out there, to be different from your competition, to capitalize on things that are happening, to make your store fresh and new and exciting. That's all part and parcel of this stat. So if you're looking at your profit margin in relation to what your inventory is at cost, then you can actually see, what is my investment in inventory really doing for me, and is it working or is it not working? Many times, by the way, we have tied, for some customers, we have tied compensation plans and payroll plans to GMRoi and bonus plans to that, because that is the real measure of whether or not we are making money or not. So I think that's a really, really good one to focus on. It's a really good one to look at, and it's one that I think is probably the key and most important stat. So listen, if it's the one stat which, when heavily focused upon, causes the greatest cash flow to the business, and I wrote number 4 after number 3, do you need another reason? You probably don't. I mean, that's really the key to it right there. There's other things you can certainly do. Don't get me wrong. There's certainly other things that you do to keep your business afloat. There's all the marketing things you do. There's creative ways to use your customer lists. There's Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on and on. But all of those things, really, to my mind, are secondary to this statistic, because even if you promoted like crazy and you did a whole crazy Facebook campaign and you had 100 pictures up on Pinterest and 200 up on Instagram, and you were tweeting and you were doing all the right things, social networking, and even if you did the stuff that wasn't internet marketing type of stuff, you had your staff making a bajillion phone calls, and they were actually writing letters to people, which I still recommend, by the way. A postcard will shock your customers because they're not expecting something written from them. But you do all of those things and you do them well, okay? If you don't have the right inventory, if your assortment is not right, if you've invested too heavily in jackets and not sweaters, and this is a sweater year, and you miss it, they're just going to come and they're going to go away. And frankly, all those marketing efforts now will have to be redoubled maybe 3-4 times to get them back, because they have that impression that you have the wrong merchandise there. GMROI, when properly applied, when you're looking at your profitability against your inventory investment, forces you to rethink your assortment plan. It forces you to put the right goods on the floor, and it forces you to make those decisions early on in the season and throughout the season, so that your store is fresh and new and exciting, and it brings you more cash flow. So, I could probably talk about this stat, as you can tell from how I'm talking about it now. I talk about this one all the time because I think it's the most important of all the statistics. So you want to make sure you're getting that stat out of your point-of-sale system. For several of the ones that One Step sells, it comes just part and parcel in it, like as an example in Retail Pro version 9, it's there out of the box. For the others, if you follow the formula that I gave you, just get that margin dollar and then start tracking back your average inventory at cost. You can get to that number easily, but it's a stat you definitely want to start measuring and measure it regularly, okay? All right, so we're at the point where we start talking about questions, Donna. I'm a little bit early on this one, but while this one is the one that people seem to get confused on, if you really think of it the way I defined it in the beginning, for every dollar you invested, how many dollars did you get back? And use that simple math example, right? The first dollar is your investment in inventory. The second dollar is your investment in operations, rent, etc., okay? And everything above that is profitability. That's where you can see the most profitability for your business and the most cash flow for your business. So that's my big impassioned speech about GMROI. There you go. All right, Donna, let's go for some questions.
Okay, good. First question that's up, are there industry benchmarks?
There are some. Actually, there are the National Retail Federation, NRF, I used to have a gigantic book of them, and they still have them. Sometimes trade organizations within a particular niche or segment will offer those. Okay, but by and large, mostly what I would say is if you just go with what I've just given you in terms of the first dollar pays for the goods, the second dollar pays for the operations, everything above that is profit. What the industry is doing is almost secondary to what you can possibly do with what you currently have.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Actually, Steve wants to know, says, can you explain why the first dollar goes to inventory cost? Doesn't the gross margin already count the cost?
Doesn't the gross margin already pad the cost? Is that what he said?
Count.
Doesn't the gross margin count the cost?
Right. Why do you say the first dollar goes to inventory cost?
Well, the reason the first dollar goes to inventory is roughly, when you look at the gross margin, you're looking at your gross margin, most retail businesses operate close to 50% in terms of a maintained markup. So just mathematically, that's how that works out. I don't really have a, I could probably get someone, Steve, if you want to write to me, and I can get one of our analysts to kind of give you the mathematical reason for that. What I know is that that's how that works. If your margins are, and it may be different, by the way, depending on the industry you're in. If you've got a lower maintained margin, that may not be 100% accurate. But by and large, we've found that to be accurate to the industry. But it is true that your margin takes cost of goods into effect. That's very true. And it is very true that, but that's in the numerator, and in the denominator of it, we're also looking at cost of inventory there. So that's why those two things balance out a bit. But the main thing is we're looking at your profit in relation to your investment in inventory.
Okay, we're getting a little too many math words here, for me anyway.
Oh, I know. I did numerator and denominator. Sorry about that.
It's fine. Everybody needs to work that out for themselves. Look it up if you don't know what it means.
Well, I'll just say it. The numerator is the number at the top of the, when you, let me go back.
Yeah.
A few slides. Go to slide, this one. Okay, so here was the formula, right? Gross margin dollars divided by average inventory cost. Gross margin dollars was the numerator. That was the number at the top of the equation. And average inventory cost is the number at the bottom, or underneath the little line here.
Good. Thank you. Okay, another question. Should the average inventory calculation include freight?
It's an excellent question. I think most times it does not. Most times it is just the raw cost of goods. Where this gets to be a little bit different is if you have a mix of imported goods and domestic goods. Sometimes you want to include those because you can fool yourself into thinking that the imported goods are more profitable than they really are. I think the most important thing, though, when you look at this statistic, is that you want to be consistent in your measurement of that. Okay, you want to, if you included freight last year, do it this year. That's probably the most important part of it. I think that it's probably a good idea to include the freight because then you really are seeing what your profitability looks like. Okay, but as long as you're consistent in your application of it, whether you do the freight in it or out of it, I think it's important to make sure that that you're consistent. And again, if you have a mix of imported and domestic goods, I would for sure include it. If you don't, then you're probably safe leaving it out.
Okay, so freight is not something that you would consider part of the overhead, the second dollar that you were talking about?
Different stores look at that different ways. Some stores consider freight part of cost of goods sold, and most of the point-of-sale systems that One Step offers gives you the choice as to whether or not you want to roll the freight into cost of goods. There are other stores that consider freight to be a line item expense in their financials and don't count it as part of the inventory expense. So it really, a lot of it has to do with not only how you view it, but how your accountant views the business, and whether or not the accountant sees that as a, if they've set that up. And there are tax advantages, by the way, and you really want to talk to your tax professional about that. And so for some businesses, there are tax advantages to having freight folded into cost of goods, and some of them prefer it as a line item below the gross margin line on your profit and loss statement. But they do have impact on your tax liability, so you want to look at that too. Okay.
Okay, good. Okay, well, we've been trying to keep these fairly short because we know retailers don't have a lot of time to give. We want you back out on the floor selling or figuring out your inventory. So we're going to wind this one up today. Let's talk a little bit about what we're going to do next week, though.
Okay, let me get to that one. So the next webinar is putting it all together. And for those of you that have been with me through the 5 weeks, now we've been through, a whole bunch of stats, and I certainly have had opinions about them and how to use them and that kind of stuff. And so you may be at this point saying to yourself, well, God Almighty, now that I've got all these stats, well, how do I even start? What strategy can I use to start to put this into my business, and how do I use them? How do I read them? How do I get them? How do I do that Lord Kelvin thing, start measuring it? What should I measure? What should I measure first, second, third, fourth, etc.? And so what we're going to talk about next week is a strategy for those of you that have not been using these statistics to start to apply them to your business. And maybe even for some of you who are using them in your business, are you using all of them? Are you using them in the right sequence? Are you using them to your best advantage? There's a lot to look at there. So what I wanted to do after we did all these different statistics was to help you guys kind of put together an action plan for your business to help you figure out where am I going to get these statistics from, how am I going to start to measure them, how often do I review them, etc. So next week we're going to take a look again at all the stats, and then we'll take a look at, okay, well, how do I get started? What should I do?
That sounds like great fun. I can't wait. For anybody that's not registered for that, you can register on the homepage of onestepretail.com. The registration link is there. Plus, I'm sure you'll be getting an email this week inviting you to attend that. We do send out those emails.
I'll just leave our contact information. I'm sorry, Donna, were you done there? I jumped on.
That's fine.
Okay, so I want to leave our contact information up there, so if you want to contact One Step Retail, Donna's email is there, and the 800 number is there to call them. To contact me, my email is there, and that phone number there is my cell phone, so call me anytime. If you have questions about this, or email me your questions, and do my best to answer those for you. Both One Step and Retail Smart Guys really have the same goal in mind, which is we want to make sure you guys are profitable and are making money. And, interestingly enough, what we're finding is that in the places where we share contacts, where One Step and Retail Smart Guys have the same customers, and they're using One Step for the point of sale and us for their open to buy and inventory planning, these people are posting significant increases over last year while lowering their inventory, because they're using the stats that we're talking about and using the planning that we're talking about to make them more profitable. So I encourage you guys to consider, am I getting the most out of what One Step offers? And if you're not using us for planning, then certainly contact me, and I'm happy to talk to you about that and see if that will help you and help your business and help you grow and help you do the things that you want to do and achieve your goals. So
great.
There you go.
Thank you, Dan. We'll see you next week.
Okay, thanks, Donna. Good to talk to you again. And thanks, everybody. And certainly contact us if you have questions or any thoughts about this. Have a great week.